Alex often finds himself dumped by Mia, who seems to take advantage of his deep feelings for her. Every time she ends things, he does his best to convince her to stay. The last time Mia broke up with him, he gazed at her for a while before finally saying, "All right, 5 years have gone by, and Mia has finally worn out Alex's love for her." Mia ended things that day over something trivial. Her childhood buddy Ryan was celebrating his birthday and had just come back from studying in the States. So, Mia and her friends planned to gather and celebrate Ryan's return. But on that day, Mia totally forgot to mention it to Alex. Alex had already cooked a meal before Mia went out, making her favorite soup that took hours to prepare. He asked her to have some soup before she left. While Mia was changing her shoes in the hallway, she casually brushed him off. "No time, I'm out now." As she finished putting on her shoes and was about to leave, Alex called out to her. She turned around, the black marble wall behind her making her look both fair and sweet, though her face showed some impatience. Alex carried the soup over and held her wrist, saying, "You woke up late and your stomach's empty. You'll be eating later, so have some soup first to fill you up." She clicked her tongue impatiently and said, "Can you stop micromanaging me? It's really annoying," then waved her hand. Alex knew she probably didn't mean it, but he was already running a fever and felt weak. When she waved, the bowl of soup he was holding slipped and fell onto the marble floor, splattering everywhere. There was a moment of silence. He paused, his gaze moving from the mess on the floor to her face. Trying to stay cool, he smiled slightly and asked, "Are you extra impatient and excited today because Ryan's back? I heard he's single again." Before Alex was with Mia, she had been openly and secretly chasing after Ryan for a long time. Later, when Ryan got a girlfriend, Mia accepted Alex out of heartbreak, and they've been together since. It's been 5 years now. This comment hit a nerve. Over the years, Ryan remained the most special person in Mia's heart, and even mentioning his name felt like a taboo to her. Sure enough, Mia snapped instantly, her sweet face showing frustration, brows furrowed, and a bit of anger. "Alex, what do you mean? Are you doubting me? Can you stop being so paranoid over every little thing? It's really annoying. If you've got a problem, then let's break up." She often mentioned breaking up with him. It had become her go-to phrase. To her, breaking up wasn't a big deal, just a way to express her annoyance. Every time she said she wanted to break up, Alex would try to persuade her to stay. But this time, after she finished, he looked at her seriously for a moment, then lightly laughed and said, "All right, Mia." She seemed slightly surprised, but ignored him and turned to leave because she was in a rush. She couldn't be late for Ryan's birthday party. It didn't take long for Alex to pack his stuff. Mia didn't like him invading her space, so he had very few belongings at her place. After cleaning up the mess in the living room, he looked at the remaining soup and put it in the fridge. This was probably the last time he would make soup for Mia. Once everything was tidy, he opened WeChat, planning to say a proper goodbye since they had been together for 5 years, but a mutual friend shared a video in their group chat. It was taken in a karaoke room with colorful neon lights creating a lively vibe. Mia was singing "Tonight You'll Marry Me" with a guy Alex hadn't seen in a while but knew well. It was Ryan. After getting together with Mia, he heard her friends complain that this song was a must-sing for Mia and Ryan whenever they went karaoke. It wasn't that the song held any special meaning. Ryan had always followed Mia around as a kid, telling her he'd marry her when they grew up. So the song became a running joke among their friends. Alex finished watching the video and decided not to send the message on WeChat. He figured Mia didn't need his farewell. He grabbed his suitcase and took one last look at the empty, clean living room before leaving. The mess that had caused their argument had been cleaned up by him as if it had never existed. He sighed, feeling a bit grateful for Ryan's return. The few hours Mia spent out celebrating Ryan's return and birthday gave him the quiet time he needed to clear his things from her home. He thought he might feel a bit sad, considering they had been together for 5 years. But when he got home, he was so tired he fell asleep peacefully. Mia called him at 2 in the morning. She must have had a few drinks, as her voice was slightly louder than usual. She asked, Alex, why didn't you come to pick me up? Groggy from sleep, he replied casually, I'm sleeping. Let's talk tomorrow. As soon as he finished speaking, she hung up. Alex was a light sleeper, so her call woke him up completely. He wondered why she called. After reuniting with her childhood friend that night, she should have been a gracious host and seen Ryan home safely. He didn't expect her to call and ask why he hadn't come to pick her up, but on second thought, it was probably another bet with her friends. When Alex first started dating Mia, she went to a bar with some friends. It was raining that day, and he didn't want to intrude on her time with them. So he waited for her in a bookstore across from the bar, worried about her getting home safely after drinking. He saw her as soon as she came out. He walked up to her with an umbrella and smiled, saying, Mia, let's go home. He always felt that us and home were two very warm words. Her friends teased her, saying, Mia, how did you trick someone as devoted and gentle as Alex into being your boyfriend? There was no trickery. He was the one chasing after her. But despite how others envied her, she was quite annoyed at the time. Maybe he was too good to her. So much so that it lacked any challenge or excitement. People are inherently tricky. She asked him back then, Alex, don't you have a life of your own? He was very busy with work. At that time, he had just been invited to hold his own art exhibition. Besides creating art, he spent almost all his time and energy on her. He remembers smiling at her and saying, You're my life too. He thought that was his silent confession to her over the years. Looking back, it must have been annoying for her. Once, while waiting for her outside a bar, drawing and waiting to go home together, she came out and wasn't surprised to see him. She smiled, and her friends each handed her 100 wins, saying, You lost the bet again. Mia had bet with them that he would definitely come to pick her up. She probably lost the bet this time, which is why she angrily called him. Alex got out of bed to get a glass of water, and just as he finished drinking it, Mia called him again. There were several missed calls. When he answered, he was a bit surprised and asked, What's up? She paused, and her voice was emotionless. She asked, Alex, I'm back. Where are your things? She noticed he had cleared his belongings from her home. He thought it would take her a while to notice. He patiently and softly reminded her, Mia, you forgot. We broke up 7 hours ago. You said it yourself, and I agreed. She was silent on the other end. Just when he thought the call had dropped, she suddenly said angrily, Fine, but don't come begging me to get back together. Mia doesn't understand that Alex won't get back together with her. It's strange. In the 5 years they were together, he never once felt disappointed or tired of the relationship. Nor did he ever think of leaving. But now that he's left with the tide, he doesn't feel sad either. His brother said his love for Mia was like the money in her bank account. He was sitting on the sofa with his legs crossed, eating chips, looking like a sage. He said, Alex, your love for Mia is like the money in her bank account. She kept overdrawing it without depositing anything, so now the account is in deficit. An interesting metaphor. Alex thinks his love for Mia is indeed in a state of deficit. His brother asked what he would do next. He shrugged and said, Work. I've already arranged the venue and funding for my personal themed art exhibition. I'd need to spend about a year traveling to various countries, capturing the most beautiful scenes with my brush. The first stop is the Wine River in Spain. This river, sourced from areas rich in pyrite and copper, presents a color similar to red wine. I want to see if I can use the river water as paint for my artwork. Just thinking about it excited him. Before he left, his brother said, seeing him like this, I'm relieved. I was worried you'd be sad seeing Mia's posts on Moments. He had seen them. Mia wasn't someone who liked posting on Moments. In the 5 years they were together, she had only posted a few updates. But these past few days, her Moments were as busy as the new year. There were photos of her and Ryan visiting various scenic spots in City A and enjoying different cuisines. He could understand her joy at Ryan's return, but the frequency of her posts made him wonder if she was doing it intentionally to make him jealous. However, he quickly dismissed this thought. He swiped up on his phone screen and smiled. His brother admired him and said, As expected of you, you've taken devotion and ruthlessness to the extreme. Devotion is my greatest respect for a relationship, and ruthlessness is my respect for myself. In the taxi back, he saw another of Mia's moments. She had taken Ryan to the zoo and posted a selfie with an alpaca. He exited Moments and decided to change his profile picture. His profile picture was one taken by Mia. On their 1-year anniversary, they went on a trip, and while he was eating the ice cream she had gotten tired of, he accidentally walked into her shot of the scenery. Mia had frowned at the photo, intending to delete it, but he loved it. So he used it as his profile picture for 5 years. He changed the picture to one of his newly adopted cat. He received Mia's message before boarding the plane. It was 14 days after their breakup, and she sent him a question mark, followed by, "You changed your profile picture." A brief statement. Although he couldn't see her expression, he could imagine her frowning at her phone. He thought for a moment, then turned off his phone without replying. He boarded the plane to Spain. He had a wonderful month at the Wine River in Spain. He turned off his phone, leaving social media and other distractions behind, and focused entirely on his creations. He met an interesting person named Ava. When they first met, he was wading in the river collecting mud, his material for painting. She suddenly grabbed him from behind, wrapping her arms around his waist. He thought he was being attacked. Despite a moment of panic, he quickly smeared the mud in his hands on her face. Her face was covered in red mud. Her eyes couldn't open, but she held him tightly and said in English, "It will all be over soon. You have a long lifetime." She thought he was trying to kill himself in the river. He stopped struggling, his nerves relaxed, and he found it funny. He patted her hands on his waist and told her he was just collecting mud. That's how they met, not knowing each other at first because he had smeared so much mud on her face she couldn't see. He guided her to the nearest clean water source to wash her face. Her face was bright and cheerful once cleaned, and she turned out to be a fellow countryman. Meeting a fellow traveler in a foreign land is always delightful. After everything was sorted, he felt a bit guilty and apologized to her. She was quite relaxed and didn't get angry. Her smile was bright and carefree, a very sunny girl. She gave him a thumbs up, praising his alertness and quick reactions. She said she was on her way to a beach vacation in southern Spain. Passing through Huelva province on the A461 road, she saw him in the river and thought he was trying to kill himself. So she rushed over to save him, almost going blind in the process. After hearing about his creative concept, she was very interested. She was a curious person, and she decided to change her plans and stay to see if he could create paint using the water and mud from the Wine River to capture the local beauty. He readily accepted her request. She was a very decent and respectful person, maintaining a good distance socially, so interacting with her was very comfortable. For example, she never disturbed him when he was focused on his work. Sometimes, when he worked day and night without rest, she would have the waiter bring food to his door, knocking lightly 3 times without further interruption. When he emerged from his room, more than half a month had passed. The innkeeper's son was flirting with Ava, and it seemed the locals all liked her. She gracefully declined, then looked over at him, giving him a once-over before smiling slightly and saying, "When your artwork is exhibited, no one will believe what the artist went through to create it." He laughed too. He was covered in paint and mud, looking as if he had just been dug up from the ground. But he had just finished his proudest work, so he didn't mind Ava's teasing. He looked up at her, smiling with excitement, and said, "Weren't you curious? The time has come to satisfy your curiosity." She looked at him, slightly stunned for some reason. Then he took her to his studio. A 2-meter-long painting perfectly replicated the scenery along the Wine River. Her eyes showed amazement and surprise as she entered, which greatly pleased him. She admired it for a while, then turned to him and said seriously, "It's my honor to be the first to see this painting." After that, he treated her to a meal to thank her for her considerate care over the past few days. 3 days later, they parted ways. They were both spontaneous people and didn't even exchange contact information. To them, the other was just someone who added a bit of interest to this journey. She continued her travel plans after satisfying her curiosity, while he prepared to stay a few more days before returning home. Unexpectedly, they met on the flight back home. In first class, when he saw her, he thought he had mistaken someone else for her because she had said she would stay for another half-month. Ava also looked surprised to see him and then shrugged helplessly, saying, "There was a rebellion at the company. I have to go back to take charge." He couldn't help but smile. They landed in Beijing at 2 in the morning. Ava's driver was waiting outside the airport. She asked him enthusiastically, "If you don't mind, I can give you a ride home first." He didn't drive, so he thought about it and accepted, thanking her. The car stopped outside his apartment building and he got out and thanked Ava. Because he had a lot of luggage, she graciously got out and asked if he needed help. He smiled and said, "I can't let a lady carry my stuff." She smiled at that. Suddenly, someone called his name from the shadows near the flower bed. "Alex." It was Mia. Her tone gave nothing away. He turned around and saw her stepping out of the shadows into the light. She had lost a lot of weight over the past month. She glanced at Ava, then back at him and sneered, "So the reason you broke up with me was that you cheated?" He tried to stay calm, first thanking and saying goodbye to Ava. Although she was just a passing acquaintance, he was very grateful for her care. She considerately asked if he needed help when she saw Mia, but he shook his head, and she left gracefully, giving him space to handle the situation alone. Mia's gaze was fierce, almost menacing, like an abandoned stray cat trying to hide its panic with aggression. She asked, "Did you break up with me because you fell for someone else?" He felt a strange weariness. Over the years, he had always catered to her emotions. She was always polite and distant with others, but always took a high and mighty stance with him. He was really tired of it, but he tried to keep his emotions in check and explained patiently. "Mia, you were the one who broke up with me. Ava and I are just strangers who met by chance in Spain. You can't keep doing this." He paused, struggling to find the right words. His tone probably surprised Mia. She looked stunned, a flash of hurt crossing her eyes. After a long pause, she spoke softly. This was probably the first time in their 5 years together that she showed weakness. She said, "I heard from your friend that you were coming back tonight. I've been waiting since 6 in the afternoon. Alex, you didn't reply to my WeChat messages." She paused and asked, "In the month we've been apart, did you ever think about me?" He didn't expect her to ask such a question and was momentarily stunned. But when he thought back over the past month, all he felt was satisfaction with his work. "Not once, not even once. Did I think about Mia?" He could only remain silent. She stared at him under the streetlight, trying to read his heart from his expression. After a long moment, she suddenly smiled self-deprecatingly and said, "I don't believe you." Mia has a confidence that he doesn't believe her. He liked her for a very long time, so long that he can't remember what initially attracted him to her. It feels like his feelings for her have faded over the years, and the subsequent accommodation and care were just inertia from the residual warmth of loving her for so many years. He knew she always liked her childhood friend Ryan. She gave up the night Ryan went abroad with a teacher from their school. He doesn't know if young love is always so brave and fearless. That night, she chased after him to the airport alone, then watched Ryan hold the teacher's hand as they laughed and walked through the boarding gate. She sat at the airport until the nightfall, the brilliant neon lights illuminating her sadness. After a long time, she stood up and walked out of the airport. He had been following her all along because he was worried about her. She vented all her anger and sadness on him, asking, "Are you following me to see the joke? Get lost." He stood about 50 meters behind her and quietly said, "I'm just worried about you." That night, she walked back to the dormitory from the airport, a journey of over 10 kilometers that took her the whole night. It was probably her most miserable night, and he silently followed her, walking with her all night. In the morning, she reached the dormitory and, for some reason, turned around and asked him, "Do you really like me? Then let's be together." He was stunned for a moment, then laughed. They've been together since that day, for 5 years now. His friends used to call him a simp, but he's just someone who follows his heart. Life is short, and he wants to do what he wants. When Mia asked him if he wanted to be together, he asked himself 4 questions during those few seconds of hesitation. Do you know Mia likes someone else? Yes. Do you know Mia doesn't like you? Yes. Will you regret it if you reject Mia? Yes. Do you want to be with her? Yes. The answers were so simple. It's like they say, a forced melon isn't sweet. But how would you know unless you try? He calmly and rationally knew what he was doing. He was like this when he got together with her 5 years ago, and he's still like this as they break up 5 years later. He got what he wanted. Compared to those who have never been with the person they like, he doesn't know if he's lucky or unlucky, but at least he can let go when it's time. He has let go of Mia. Mia still stood in front of him, her small figure almost entirely covered by the streetlight's shadow. She looked up at him, as if trying to find some trace of feigned sorrow on his face. He didn't know why, but he suddenly asked, Mia, do you remember the first time you broke up with me? She was probably surprised by his question and froze for a moment. The first time she broke up with him was about 3 months into their relationship. She did it over WeChat, and then she forgot about it and went to Tibet with her friends for 7 days. When she came back, he was waiting for her outside her dormitory. It was raining that day, and he was soaked and feverish. When she saw him, she was startled and asked, What are you doing here? He was quite sad at that moment, but still smiled at her. She probably softened because her heart had already given up on Ryan, so it didn't matter who she was with. And they got back together. He asked her, Mia, when we broke up and you went to Tibet, did you ever think of me, even for a moment? He sighed and said, I felt the same way as you did back then. Her expression darkened with his words. She stepped back a few paces, then turned and left. In his eyes. Coming to find him tonight was already a great concession, giving him face and respect. The fact that he didn't reciprocate probably felt like a slap in the face to her. She had every right to be angry. When his friend found out that Mia had come to see him, he was surprised and asked, Could it be that Miss Tin realized after losing you that she actually likes you deeply? Alex just smiled without saying anything. Rather than saying she liked him, it was more likely that her possessiveness was at play. The humble boyfriend who had always revolved around her after the breakup neatly cleaned up everything and disappeared completely from her world. No WeChat messages. No attempts at reconciliation. No usual caring gestures. It's like a pet dog that always wagged its tail and followed you around suddenly stopped responding one day. She would naturally be curious and wave a bone in front of it to test its reaction. To Mia, he was that pet dog. She came to test him because his post-breakup behavior surprised her. So she waved a bone in front of him to see if he was still within her control, if he showed even a hint of longing or affection. He believed she would quickly lose interest and walk away. His friends said he was overthinking it, and he stayed silent. Mia began to appear in his world more frequently. It's quite funny. After they broke up, she sought him out more often than she did in the last year they were together. At first, it was because she found a stuffed bear he had left behind. This was the first birthday gift Mia gave him because he had a habit of hugging her while sleeping. It was an unconscious behavior, so she gave him this bear to hug at night. She called and asked, Do you want to come and get it, or should I bring it to you? He paused and said, No, just throw it away. Mia was silent for a long time. Just before she hung up, he added, If you find anything else of mine, feel free to dispose of it. No need to contact me. She didn't respond. That night, Mia called again. He didn't answer the first time, but the phone kept ringing persistently. He sighed and picked up. She was drunk. He was slightly surprised because she always knew her limits and never got drunk. She slurred, You left something at my place. He patiently said, I don't want it. Please throw it away. Also, he paused. Mia, don't call me late at night anymore. I won't answer. She ignored him and continued. The necklace. The one designed by César that you like. I bought it and you forgot to take it. This was the anniversary gift he had mentioned to Mia for their 5th anniversary. 2 weeks before the anniversary, she asked what he wanted. This was surprising because in all the years they were together, he was the one always giving her gifts. He told her he liked a necklace designed by César. It was meaningful because the designer created it inspired by his 5-year relationship with his boyfriend. It held a lot of sentimental value. Mia nodded and said, "Okay." But on their 5th anniversary, she forgot not only the necklace but the anniversary itself. 3 days later, Ryan returned from the US, and she was eager to celebrate his birthday, preparing a birthday gift and a welcome home party for him. Then they broke up. "See, the reason I don't love you anymore is just the accumulation of all these moments." His voice turned cold as he said, "It's too late, Mia." There was a commotion on her end, and someone took the phone, apologizing to him. "Alex, I'm sorry, Mia is drunk." After a moment of hesitation, she asked, "Is there no chance for you two to get back together?" He hung up the phone. After hanging up, he stared at the ceiling, feeling that saying he was completely unaffected would be a lie. After all, he truly loved her once. He just sighed at how extreme her change in attitude was. He couldn't reconcile the previously cold Mia with the current one. Her newfound gentleness and thoughtfulness always seemed out of place to him. 3 months later, he saw Mia again. They broke up in early summer, and in the blink of an eye, it was late autumn. The weather was turning cold, and she was wearing a long black coat. Although they had broken up, he had to admit that she was still stunningly beautiful. She was leaning against the gate of his apartment complex, smoking. The period when Ryan and his teacher first went abroad for further studies was when she smoked the most, combined with drinking and staying up late. She ended up in the hospital. After being discharged, she subconsciously controlled it. He didn't know why she started smoking again. She heard his footsteps and looked up at him. She looked a bit tired and said, "Sorry, I know I'm disturbing you, but my mom is coming to City A this weekend, and I haven't told her about our breakup yet." Strangely, although Mia didn't like him when they were together, her mother was very fond of him. Maybe it was his calm and steady demeanor, different from the spoiled brats in Mia's social circle. Her mother had a heart condition. He hesitated, and Mia's expression showed a bit of pleading. "Just for 2 days, I'll explain everything to her slowly afterward." He sighed and nodded. Seeing him nod, she breathed a sigh of relief and took a step back, surprisingly polite, saying, "Thank you." Before leaving, she handed him a bag. "It's getting cold, and you need to take care of your throat." This was an old issue of his. His throat often got inflamed during the transition from autumn to winter. Every year, Mia would have a friend buy him a particular health supplement from Australia, and as long as he took it in advance, it would prevent the problem. He was surprised she still remembered. He held the bag and watched her leave, feeling a mix of emotions. Mia's mother stayed for 2 days and then left. To avoid suspicion, he moved some of his belongings to Mia's place. After her mother left, he packed up his things. Mia quietly followed him around. When he was about to carry his suitcase downstairs, she suddenly grabbed his hand. She looked down, so he couldn't see her expression. She asked, "Can't you stay?" After a pause, she looked up at him, explaining with some restraint, "There's really nothing between Ryan and me. I admit that when he came back, I felt some waves of emotion, but that was just a normal reaction to someone I once liked. I never thought about being with him." Her voice had a subtle choke. She paused and then continued, "It was my fault for breaking up with you. It won't happen again, Alex. Give me another chance, please." He had never seen her like this, feeling troubled. He turned to leave, maybe because he was preoccupied. He missed a step and fell down the stairs. He broke his calf bone. Mia stayed with him in the hospital, helping him with the admission procedures and taking care of him. When he woke up after the surgery, she was asleep next to his bed. Hospital beds were scarce, and there were 4 patients in one room. Her body was squeezed between 2 beds, unable to stretch out, looking quite pitiful. Even in her sleep, her brows were furrowed, looking uneasy. Her other hand was still covering his, as if she wanted to be ready to wake up if he needed anything at night. He thought for a moment and didn't pull his hand away. The anesthesia in his leg was slowly wearing off, and the increasing pain kept him awake. He lay there, recalling a time long ago. Back then, he had just graduated and entered the workforce, carrying the title of a genius graduate. An art gallery investor invited him to dinner. Being young, he didn't have much sense of caution and thought the investor genuinely appreciated his talent. It wasn't until the investor poured him a third drink and put his hand on his shoulder that he realized something was wrong. There was something in the drink, and he felt weak. Later, Mia appeared out of nowhere and smashed a bottle over the investor's head. Then she took him away. He found out later that she was supposed to go to a concert with friends that night. Mia never used this incident to seek credit or blame him for causing her to miss the concert she had been looking forward to. For some reason, he suddenly remembered her goodness. In the barren soil of their love, there had indeed been beautiful moments like these, to be honest. He was somewhat swayed. Mia stayed with him in the hospital until he was discharged. He had told her she didn't need to, that his friend would come and accompany him. He wanted to cut the ties quickly, but she insisted on taking some responsibility, thinking that she was partly to blame for his fall down the stairs. His friend, hearing that Mia was partly to blame for his fall, joked that there was a chance they might get back together and decided not to come to the hospital. The elderly lady in the next bed smiled at them and asked, "Young man, your girlfriend is really considerate. Such good girls are rare nowadays." He smiled, and when he looked up, he saw Mia standing at the foot of the bed, watching him nervously. After a while, she suddenly smiled. The smile spread from her eyes to her lips. Even after they were discharged and got into her car, she looked at him and said, "I'm very happy, Alex. Just now, when that lady called me your girlfriend, you didn't deny it." He opened his mouth, but didn't say anything. He just felt it was unnecessary because she had been with him for so long. And explaining to outsiders that she wasn't his girlfriend would inevitably lead to more questions. And after all, she was a young lady. He didn't want to embarrass her in front of others. Since they were about to leave the hospital, he just wanted to avoid any additional trouble. But seeing the smile on her lips, he sighed and remained silent. Mia wanted to continue their relationship. If it were the current Mia, he actually would be willing to give it a try. Could the love lost in the dust of time really come back? This thought persisted until Mia took him to her house. He had fallen in a rush that day, and his luggage was still at Mia's place. Her mother had brought him some dried fish that he liked very much. So after leaving the hospital, they went to her house to get his things, and when the door opened, he saw Ryan. Ryan was wearing an apron, holding a spatula in one hand, looking like the man of the house, smiling kindly, and said, "Oh, Mia, you're back. You said you'd be taking Alex home from the hospital, so I thought you probably didn't have time to eat. Come on in." He waved them in, wearing the watch Mia's mother had given him, which he had left on Mia's bedside table after they broke up. His gaze shifted from the watch to Mia's face. Then he stood at the door and suddenly laughed. It was a laugh of release and calm. At that moment, he knew that Mia and he would never be possible in this lifetime. Whether it was 5 years ago or 5 years later, when they stood together, the one who didn't fit in was always him. But that was okay. He didn't mind anymore. He stood politely and distantly at the door, declining. "No need. I'm in a hurry to get back. I won't bother you." Then he turned to Mia. "I won't go in. Please bring my things out." "Thank you." She looked a bit pale, glanced at Ryan, then at him, and said before going in to get the luggage, "I'll explain everything to you later." He didn't say anything. After she went inside, the smile on Ryan's face gradually disappeared. Ryan looked at him with hostility, as if he were an intruder, and his smile turned venomous like a snake. "You won't make me lose a bet, will you?" He raised an eyebrow in confusion, and Ryan smiled and explained. "The day you came back to China, they said you and Mia had broken up. Mia and her friends all bet that within 3 months, you'd be crawling back. The bet was later extended to 6 months. Mia and her friends all bet you'd come back, but I bet you wouldn't." He asked him word by word. "You won't make me lose, will you?" He looked at him and didn't answer, just said calmly, I don't know if you'll lose your bet, but I do know Mia's friends should win theirs. When your teacher in America dumped you and you had to come back, they bet on whether you'd act like a pretentious coquette and get Mia to take you back. He laughed, seeing Ryan's pale face, and said, looks like her friends should have won. Just then, Mia came out with his luggage. He took it and smiled. Thanks, no need to see me off. My friend is coming to pick me up, so I won't bother you. Finally, he looked at Mia with a relieved smile and said, Mia, if you want me to keep a good impression of you in my memory, please don't contact me again. That was the last thing he said to her the last time he saw her. It was also the last good thing she did for him. 2 years later, he saw Ava at an art exhibition. She was standing in front of his painting of the Wine River. He walked over and stood beside her, looking at it together. After 2 years without seeing each other, they didn't engage in polite small talk. It was as if they were old friends. She turned her head and smiled at him. I saw the news about your exhibition and decided to come, just as impressive as I imagined. She paused, then asked with a smile, after the exhibition, can I invite the artist to dinner? He smiled back and said, of course. Time flies, the seasons change, the sun sets, and the moon rises. After spring comes summer, autumn, and winter. Life is long, with many landscapes to see. You have to experience them yourself to truly understand. As for what the future holds, you'll only know by living it.